Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at our last problem. Now, I've already transferred over the coefficients and the constants. So if you haven't done that already, go ahead and pause the video and do that and then hit play. Okay, so if you'll recall, what we need to do is we're looking for everything below this group of numbers right here. We're looking for these values to be zeros, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're looking for the path of least resistance. And already, right off the bat, I see that this 2 and this -2 can create a zero pair. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do row 1, and I'm going to add that to row 3. And then I'm going to replace row 3 with that. And that will give me a zero value right here. And so if you'll remember, what we want to do before we even do the math is we want to go ahead and transfer the rows that we can transfer. And so we can transfer, since we're replacing row 3, we can go ahead and transfer the values for rows 1 and 2 down. Okay, so I'm going to do that. 2, -4, and 5, -33, and 4, -1, 0, and -5. Okay, and so since we're just doing some adding here, I'm just going to go ahead and not worry about writing the math out and go ahead and just combine those two rows. So 2 plus a -2, that's going to give me a 0 right there. -4 plus 1 is going to give me the -3. 5 plus -3 is going to give me a +2. And then -33 plus 19 is going to give me a -14. Okay, so we got a 0 there, and now we get to choose, do we do this one or do we do this one? It's really up to you, but I would probably choose to do this right here. If I do this right here, I know 4 and 2, I can just end up doubling a row and then subtracting this one. Whereas the easiest one here would be to combine 2 and 3. But because we've already created a 0 here, we don't want to combine 2 and 3 because then the 4, the value that ends up being for this x will actually get transferred down here. So we would create a 0, but then also get rid of a 0 that we want to keep. Okay, so I'm just going to combine these two right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 2 times row 1, and then I'm going to subtract. So do that. I'm going to subtract row 2, and then what this is going to do is it's actually going to replace row 2. Okay. So now that we're doing some multiplication, I'm actually going to write those math steps out. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and transfer my data that I can transfer. And since we're replacing row 2, I'm going to go ahead and transfer rows 1 and 3 because I know that they're going to stay the same. 5 and -33, and I'm transferring row 3, so 0, -3, and +2, and then that's going to be -14 right there. Okay, so now we need to replace row 2 by multiplying row 1 by 2 and then subtracting row 2. Okay, so the step 1 for our x values right here is going to be 2 times 2 minus row 2, which is 4, and that actually gives us 0, which is what we were looking for. So there's our 0. Now we're going to do the y's. So 2 times -4, and since it's minus row 2 and row 2 is negative, so it's actually going to be +1, and that actually gives us a -7, so -7. And then finally 2 times row 1, or not finally, but the z value, 2 times the 5, minus row 2, which is 0, so then that's just 2 times 5, which is 10. It's 10. Oops, that's not where we put that, right here. There we go. And then now we're going to do 2 times row 1, which is -33, so 2 times -33, minus row 2 minus row 2, which is a negative 5, so that actually ends up being plus 5 equals. So 2 times negative 33 is a negative 66 plus 5 is negative 61. Okay, 61. Okay, so now, excuse me, we have our zeros here and we want a 0 here. Now, we really can't use row 1 because row 1 has a value for our x, and if we combine it with this row 3, we're going to get this 0 is going to disappear. So we really want to combine rows 2 and 3 because they're both 0 values for our x. Okay, so we know that we're combining rows 2 and 3. So row 2 plus row 3. And I know that that's going to replace my row 3. But now we got to figure out what we're going to be multiplying these rows by. We need a number that negative 7 and negative 3 go into. And so obviously 21 should be the one that we choose because it's negative 7 times negative 3 and it's their lowest common multiple. Okay, so then that means that what we do to row 2, we're going to have to multiply row 2. Let's say we're going to multiply it by a negative 3 to make this positive. Okay, so I'm going to multiply this row 2 by negative 3. And that means I'm going to multiply row 3 by positive 7, and that's going to keep this value negative. Okay. Okay, so we know that our x's are going to 0 out. Or actually, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're replacing row 3, so let me go ahead and write this down here, which means that rows 1 and 2 can stay. Okay, so row 1 is 2, negative 4, positive 5, and negative 33. Row 2 is 0, negative 7, positive 10, and negative 61. Okay, and we're replacing row 3. Now, since both of these values are 0, we know that we're going to get a 0 here, so that's already done for us. And now we're canceling these out, right? So negative 3 times negative 7 is positive 21. 7 times negative 3 is negative 21. So those 0 out as well. Okay, so now let's look at what we're going to do for these two values. So that's going to be negative 3 times positive 10 plus 7 times what's in that row 3 there, which is positive 2. And that equals negative 30 plus 14 is going to be a negative 16. Okay, that's negative 16. And then we're going to do that now for these values right here. Okay, so we get negative 3 times 61, or negative 61, negative 61, plus 7 times negative 14, negative 14. And I'll go ahead and put that there. Okay, so negative 3 times negative 61 is positive 183. 7 times negative 14 is going to be 98, so it's going to be minus 98. And so in this case, we end up with a value of positive 85. Okay, so that's going to give us a positive 85. Okay, so now we've got our zeros here. We can go ahead and rewrite our equations. Remember, the first equation is going to be the same as the original, 2x minus 4y plus 5z equals 33, because we really didn't change that row 1 at all. Okay, our second one is going to be negative 7y plus 10z equals negative 61. Negative 61. And then we have negative 16z equals positive 85. Okay, and so because this last equation has nothing but z, we can solve for z. We can plug that in for our z here to get our y value. And then once we have our y value, we can plug that and the z value in for our y and z here. Okay, so the first step is to divide both sides by negative 16. And as you can see, z is a really fun fraction, 85 over negative 16, or negative 85 over 16. And since 85 and 16 don't have common divisors, that's completely simplified. Now you could turn that into a decimal. I prefer to leave it in the fraction format. I think it's easier to manipulate that way, but it's completely up to you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug this value in for my z value here into the next equation. And so I'm going to go ahead and write that out. Negative 7y plus 10 times negative 85 over 16 equals negative 61. Negative 61. Okay. So you could do this a couple different ways. What I would probably do is just go ahead and multiply this by 10. And so if I do that, I'm going to transfer this over to here, right here. And actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm also going to move my camera down here because you don't need that stuff anymore. There we go. Okay. So, oops. Let's go ahead and do that. So we've got negative 7y equals, and I'm going to transfer that to the other side, negative 61 plus 850 over 16. So as you can see, all I did was I distributed the 10, which gives you a negative 850 on top, and then I added this whole fraction to the other side. Okay, so let's go ahead and use our calculator. Negative 61 plus 850 over 16. So we've got negative 61. So negative 61 plus, and I'm going to move that guy, 850. So we need to do this in fraction format. 850 divided by 16. So 16. And let's go ahead and hit enter. Oops, I messed that up. So let's go 850. Let's see if we do it that way. Yeah, that's how I do it. 16. And let's go ahead and hit enter and see what that tells us. And it tells us that that's negative 7.875. Okay, so let's take that back. And negative 7.875, if you want to, again, you can transfer to a decimal or a fraction. Since this gave it to me, I can actually do, negative 63 over 8. Okay, so let's, negative 63 over 8 is what we ended up with. So then that means that negative 7y equals negative 63 over 8. And what we're going to want to do is divide this by 7, or negative 7, and then divide this whole thing by negative 7. And actually, if you will look at your negative 63, and if you divide that by negative 7, you're going to end up with positive 9 on top. Okay, and so what we get is y equals 9/8. Okay, so now we have our y 9/8, and we have our z negative 85/16. We can plug both of those values in for this top equation, this original equation. And if you do that for your y and your z, what you get, so let me write this out. What you get for your x is x equals negative 31 over 32. We got for y, we got y equals 9/8. And for z, we got negative 85/16. Now, if you're like, wow, these were really gross numbers, well, I mean, sometimes that's how it works out. These are fractions. But if you're unsure of yourself at all, if you plug all three of these numbers back into either this equation, actually, you would only have to try 2, or this equation, you would actually see that they are correct. And so that is your answer for this problem, or those three are your answers. Thank you very much.